I returned to visit my wife unexpectedly and found her sleeping on the doormat, wearing torn old clothes like a stray animal. My son-in-law stepped out, laughing, wiped his muddy designer shoes on her shoulder, and told his guests not to worry about the crazy maid. I did not scream. I did not throw a punch. I simply took a step forward, and the look in my eyes made the music stop, because they had no idea who I really was. Before I continue this story, please like and subscribe if you believe that families should protect each other, not destroy each other. And tell me in the comments where you are watching from. My name is Clifford Dalton. To my neighbors and even to my own daughter, I am just a retired truck driver who spent 40 years hauling freight across the interstates of America. They see my calloused hands, my worn-out flannel shirts, and my simple way of speaking, and they assume I am just another old man scraping by on a pension. They do not know the truth. They do not know that I own the trucking company. They do not know that I own the logistics firm that bought the trucking company. They do not know that 2 weeks ago I was in Zurich closing the sale of a European shipping subsidiary for 9 figures. I have spent a lifetime building an empire in the shadows because I wanted to know who loved me for me and who loved me for my wallet. I had been in Europe for 2 months handling the merger. I missed my wife, Beatrice. We have been married for 45 years. She is the only person in the world who knows the full extent of our fortune, but she is a woman of simple tastes. She loves gardening and knitting. She hates ostentation. When our daughter Vanessa married Bradley, a man whose ambition was written all over his face, Beatrice and I decided to help them. I bought a sprawling estate in Greenwich, Connecticut, through a blind trust. I let them live there rent-free. I paid for the renovations. I even pulled strings to get Bradley his position as CFO at a mid-sized tech firm, though he thinks he got it on his own merit. All we asked in return was that they let us stay in the guest cottage when we visited, and that they look after Beatrice while I was away on these long business trips. Beatrice had undergone hip surgery right before I left. She needed rest. She needed care. I trusted my daughter. I trusted that even a shark like Bradley would have the decency to treat his mother-in-law with respect. I was wrong. It was a Tuesday night in November when my flight landed at JFK. I decided not to call. I wanted to surprise Beatrice. I wanted to see the look on her face when I walked in 2 weeks early. It was raining, a cold, biting rain that soaked through your bones. I took an Uber to Greenwich. As the car wound through the manicured streets of the wealthy suburbs, I felt a knot of anxiety in my stomach. I have always trusted my gut. It is how I survived in business, and my gut was telling me something was rotten. The Uber driver pulled up to the iron gates of the estate. They were open. The long driveway was lined with luxury cars, Mercedes, BMW, few Porsches. I frowned. Vanessa had not mentioned a party. I paid the driver and grabbed my duffel bag. I stood there in the rain looking up at the house I had paid for. It was lit up like a Christmas tree. Music thumped from inside a smooth jazz playlist that screamed pretension. Shadows moved against the curtains. They were having a cocktail party. I walked up the driveway, the rain plastering my hair to my forehead. I must have looked like a vagrant. An old man with a limp and a cheap bag walking toward a mansion. I reached the massive oak front doors. I was about to ring the bell when I saw something on the porch. To the left of the door, tucked into the shadows, away from the direct light of the sconces, was a pile of gray rags. It looked like someone had left a bundle of old laundry out in the damp air. Then the bundle shivered. I froze. I dropped my bag. I stepped closer, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. It was not laundry. It was a person. A small, frail person curled into a fetal position on a thin, dirty mat. She was wearing a gray uniform that was 2 sizes too big and torn at the hem. Her hair, usually dyed a soft brown, was completely gray and matted with dirt. Her hands were red and cracked from the cold. Beatrice. My knees almost gave out. This was my wife. This was the woman who had stood by me when I was a nobody with one truck and a mountain of debt. She was sleeping on the porch like a dog. "Beatrice," I whispered. She did not hear me. She was muttering something in her sleep, shivering violently as the wind whipped rain onto the porch. I reached out to touch her, but before my hand could make contact, the front door swung open. Laughter spilled out loud and raucous. The warmth from the foyer hit me, smelling of expensive perfume and hors d'oeuvres. I stepped back into the shadows instinctively. Bradley stepped out. He was wearing a tuxedo that fit him too perfectly. He held a crystal tumbler of scotch in one hand. Flanking him were two men I recognized vaguely from business magazines, potential investors he had been trying to court for months. "Gentlemen, the view of the grounds is spectacular, even in the rain," Bradley said, his voice dripping with that oily charm he used on everyone who had a net worth over $1 million. He took a step forward, and then he stopped. He looked down at Beatrice. He did not look surprised. He did not look concerned. He looked annoyed. Beatrice stirred. The noise had woken her. She scrambled to sit up, her eyes wide with terror. She looked disoriented, her movements jerky and stiff from the cold and her hip surgery. "I am sorry, sir," she stammered, her voice thin and raspy. "I was just resting my eyes. I will clean it up. I will clean it right now, sir." "Sir, she called our son-in-law, sir." Bradley laughed. It was a cruel short sound. He looked at the two investors. "Apologies, gentlemen," he said, gesturing to my wife with his glass. "It is so hard to find good help these days. This is our live-in maid. She is a bit touched in the head, if you know what I mean. We keep her around out of charity, but she insists on sleeping out here. She thinks she is a guard dog." One of the investors chuckled nervously. "A bit eccentric, is she?" "You have no idea," Bradley said. Then he did something that made the world turn red. He looked at his patent leather dress shoes. There was a smudge of mud on the toe of the right one. He looked at Beatrice, who was trying to push herself up against the brick wall. He extended his foot. He placed his shoe on the shoulder of her torn gray dress, and he wiped it. He ground the mud from his sole into the fabric of my wife's clothing, while she flinched and lowered her head. "Stand up straight when guests are present, you crazy old hag," Bradley hissed, though he kept a smile plastered on his face for the investors. "You are embarrassing us." That was the moment the old Clifford Dalton, the patient businessman, died. The man who replaced him was something much colder and much more dangerous. I stepped out of the shadows. "That is enough," I said. My voice was not loud, but it cut through the rain and the jazz music like a razor blade. Bradley jumped. He spun around, spilling a little of his scotch. The investors looked at me, taking in my wet flannel shirt and my duffel bag with expressions of distaste. "Who the hell are you?" one of them asked. Bradley stared at me. His eyes narrowed. He did not look afraid. He looked disgusted. "Oh, wonderful," Bradley sneered. "The circus is complete. Gentlemen, this is the other charity case I was telling you about. My father-in-law, the truck driver." He emphasized the words truck driver with a sneer as if it were a disease. I ignored him. I walked past him, shoving his shoulder hard enough to make him stumble back a step. I knelt beside Beatrice. "B," I said softly. "It is me. It is Cliff." She looked at me. Her eyes were glazed, the pupils dilated. She looked at me, but she did not see me. She flinched away from my hand. "No, no, I did not break the vase," she whimpered. "Please do not lock me in the basement again. I will be good. I promise I will be good." Basement. I felt a physical pain in my chest, sharp and agonizing. They had been locking her in the basement. They had terrified her so much, she did not even recognize her own husband. I gently took her hands. They were ice cold. I took off my heavy coat and wrapped it around her shoulders. Bradley regained his composure. He stepped toward me, looming over us. "Look at this," he said to the guests, shaking his head. "Senility runs in the family. Clifford, get her out of here. You are ruining my party. Take her around the back to the servants' quarters where she belongs. I stood up. I helped Beatrice to her feet, supporting her weight, because her bad hip was clearly giving out. I turned to face Bradley. The rain dripped from the brim of my hat. You just wiped your shoes on my wife, I said. Bradley rolled his eyes. She is a maid, Clifford, and a useless one at that. She spills more than she cleans. Honestly, we should have put her in a state home months ago, but Vanessa has a soft spot for strays. You called her a maid, I repeated. You told these men she is your servant. Because she is. Bradley snapped, his patience snapping. Look around you, Clifford. This estate costs $50,000 a month to maintain. Who do you think pays for that? Me. I am the CFO. I bring home the bacon. You two, you are leeches. You live in my guest house. You eat my food. So yes, if she wants a roof over her head, she earns it. She scrubs the floors. She does the laundry. And if she acts crazy, she sleeps on the mat. That is the rule. He leaned in close, his breath smelling of expensive scotch and rot. Now take your crazy wife and get off my porch before I call security and have you both thrown into the street. I have important people to impress. I looked at the two investors. They were watching this scene with morbid fascination, but neither of them said a word. They were complicit in their silence. I looked at Bradley. I memorized his face. I memorized the arrogance in his jaw, the cruelty in his eyes. I wanted to remember exactly what he looked like at the height of his power. I nodded slowly. All right, Bradley, I said. We will go, eh? He smirked. Good. Finally, a moment of clarity. Go on. Scram. I tightened my grip on Beatrice's arm. I led her down the steps past the luxury cars into the rain. I did not go to the guest house. I did not go to the back. I walked straight down the driveway toward the gate. Where are you going? Bradley called out, a hint of confusion in his voice. The servants' quarters are that way. I did not turn back. I pulled out my phone and summoned the Uber driver who had just dropped me off. He was still down the street. We stood at the gate in the pouring rain. Beatrice was shaking violently against me. Cliff. She whispered, a moment of lucidity breaking through the fog. Is that you? Yes, honey, I said, choking back tears. It is me. I am so hungry, Cliff, she said. They only give me the scraps from the dinner parties. They say I do not deserve fresh food because I broke a plate. I held her tighter. I felt the rage burning in my gut, hot and white. It was a fuel I had not felt in years. It was the same fuel that drove me to buy my first truck when the bank laughed at me. It was the same fuel that made me crush my competitors when they tried to price me out of the market. The Uber pulled up. I opened the door and helped Beatrice inside. The warmth of the car hit us, whereto the driver asked, looking concerned at Beatrice's appearance. The St. Regis Hotel in Manhattan, I said. The presidential suite. The driver raised an eyebrow but put the car in gear. As we pulled away, I looked back at the mansion one last time. I saw Bradley laughing with his guests, closing the heavy door, shutting out the storm. He thought he had won. He thought he had discarded the trash. He thought I was just a broken old man with no power, no money, and no fight left. He had no idea that he had just declared war on the owner of the company that signed his paychecks. He had no idea that the house he was standing in was legally mine. He had no idea that the car he drove, the suit he wore, and the food he ate were all paid for by the man he had just called a leech. I took Beatrice's cold hand in mine. You are safe now, Bea, I whispered, and I promise you, by the time I am done with him, he will wish he had never been born. We arrived at the hotel an hour later. The staff knew me. They did not bat an eye at my wet clothes or my wife's condition. They saw the black Centurion card in my hand, and they moved mountains. Within minutes, we were in a suite that cost more per night than Bradley made in a month. I ordered room service. Soup, warm bread, tea, everything soft and comforting. I ran a hot bath. I helped Beatrice out of that degrading maid's uniform. When I saw her body, I broke down. She was skin and bones. Her ribs showed through her pale skin. But worse were the bruises, yellow and purple marks on her arms, likely from being grabbed too hard. A nasty welt on her shin. And the look in her eyes, a haunted, skittish look that belonged to a prisoner of war, not a beloved grandmother. I washed her hair gently, rinsing away the mud and the neglect. She fell asleep in the bath, exhausted. I carried her to the bed, tucking her into sheets with a thread count fit for royalty. I sat in the armchair in the corner of the darkened room, listening to her breathing. I did not sleep. I pulled out my phone. It was 3 a.m., but I dialed a number that I knew would be answered. Leonard Katz, my personal attorney and the fiercest shark in New York City. Clifford Leonard's voice was groggy but alert. "It is 3 a.m. Is everything all right?" "No, Leonard," I said. "Nothing is all right." I told him everything. I told him about the doormat, the uniform, the insults, the physical abuse, the basement. There was silence on the other end of the line. Then I heard the sound of a lamp clicking on and the rustle of sheets. "I am heading to the office," Leonard said. "What do you want to do?" "I want to destroy him, Leonard. I want to take it all. The house, the car, the job, the reputation. I want him to have nothing. I want him to feel exactly as small and helpless as he made my wife feel tonight." "Consider it done," Leonard said. "But Clifford, we need to be smart. We need proof. We need to know exactly how deep this rot goes. If they were drugging her or starving her, we need medical documentation." "I am taking her to Dr. Evans at Mount Sinai first thing in the morning," I said. "He is an old friend. He will keep it quiet." "Good. And Clifford? What about Vanessa?" The question hung in the air. My daughter. My only child. She had been in that house. She had to have known. She had to have seen her mother sleeping on a mat and done nothing. I looked at Beatrice sleeping fitfully in the bed. If she stood by and watched this happen, I said, my voice cold as ice, then she is not my daughter anymore. She is just another target. I hung up the phone. I walked to the window and looked out at the city lights. The rain had stopped, but the storm was just beginning. The next morning, the sun broke over the skyline, but it brought no warmth. I ordered a private car to take us to the private hospital wing. Beatrice was awake, but she was quiet. She kept touching the silk sheets as if she couldn't believe they were real. Dr. Evans met us at the private entrance. He took one look at Beatrice and his professional mask slipped. "My God, Clifford," he whispered. "What happened to her?" "Yes, examine her, John," I said. "I need a full toxicology screen. I need a nutritional panel. I need everything documented. Photos of the bruises. Everything." While the nurses took Beatrice for scans, I stepped into the hallway and dialed Vanessa. The phone rang 4 times. "Hello?" Her voice sounded tired, anxious. "Vanessa, it is Dad." "Dad." "Oh my God, where are you?" "Bradley said you came back last night and caused a scene. He said you dragged Mom out into the storm. He is furious, Dad. He says you embarrassed him in front of the investors. You need to bring Mom back right now and apologize." I closed my eyes. There was no concern for her mother. No question about whether she was cold or hungry. Just worry about Bradley's ego. "Is that what he said?" I asked calmly. "Yes, he said Mom was having one of her episodes and you just enabled her. Dad, you know she needs structure. She needs to be managed. Bradley says if you bring her back by noon, he might let you stay in the cottage, but you have to follow his rules." "Structure," I asked. "Is that what you call sleeping on a doormat? Is that what you call starving her?" She went quiet. Dad, you do not understand. She gets messy. She spills things. Bradley has expensive rugs. It is just easier if she stays outside sometimes. It is not like she minds. She thinks it is a game. She thinks it is a game because she is terrified, Vanessa. Look, Dad, I cannot talk right now. Bradley is on a rampage. Just bring her back. Please, for my sake. Do not make this harder than it has to be. For your sake. I realized then that my daughter was gone. She had been consumed by her husband's narcissism. Or perhaps she had always been this weak, and I had been too blind to see it. She was an accomplice. She watched her mother, the woman who sat up with her when she had fevers, the woman who paid for her college, be treated like an animal, and she justified it to protect her husband's rugs. I will not be bringing her back, Vanessa, I said. What you have no money, Dad. Where are you going to go? A shelter. You cannot take care of her. You are old. You are broke. I took a deep breath. I am coming to the house on Saturday, I said. Saturday, why? To settle things. Tell Bradley I will be there. I hung up before she could answer. Dr. Evans came out of the examination room. He held a clipboard, and his knuckles were white. Clifford, come into my office. We sat down. He laid the file on the desk. She is severely malnourished, Clifford. She has lost 30 pounds in 2 months. She is dehydrated, but that is not the worst of it. What is it? We ran the tox screen. Her blood is full of haloperidol and benzodiazepines. High doses. Way higher than therapeutic levels. I stared at him. What does that mean? It means they were drugging her, Clifford. These are heavy antipsychotics. They are used for severe schizophrenia or to sedate violent patients in wards. Given to an elderly woman with no history of psychosis, it causes confusion, memory loss, lethargy, and compliance. It mimics dementia. They were chemically lobotomizing her. I felt the room spin. They weren't just neglecting her. They were poisoning her. They were making her look crazy so they could control her. Why, I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Why would they do that? To invalidate her, Evans said. If she is diagnosed with dementia, she loses legal standing. She cannot make decisions, she cannot testify, and what? And it makes it very easy to commit someone to a state facility against their will. The rage that had been burning since the night before flared into an inferno. They were going to lock her away. They were going to throw her into a bin so they could enjoy the house without the inconvenience of her presence. Thank you, John, I said, standing up. Give me all the records. I walked out of the hospital. I called Leonard. Leonard, I said. Change of plans. We are not just taking the house. What do you mean I want to know where the money went? I set up a trust for them. I gave them access to an emergency fund for medical expenses. Find out what they did with it. I am already on it, Leonard said. I pulled the logs this morning. Clifford, it is bad. Tell me. Bradley forged Beatrice's signature. He drained the emergency fund 3 months ago. $200,000. What did he buy? Medical equipment, home care? No. He bought a Porsche 911 GT3, and he put a deposit down on a vacation home in the Hamptons. He stole my wife's retirement money to buy a sports car. Okay, I said. Listen to me carefully, Leonard. I want you to buy his debt. His debt, yes. Everything. His credit cards, his car loans, his student loans, if he still has them. Buy them all. Use the shell company. Become his only creditor. Done. What else? Find out who his boss is. The CEO of the tech firm. That is easy. It is Global Tech Solutions. The CEO is Marcus Sterling. I started laughing. It was a dark, humorless sound. Marcus Sterling, I asked. Yes. You know him, Chantal. Know him. Leonard. Global Tech is a subsidiary of Trident Holdings. I know, Leonard said. And you own Trident Holdings. Exactly. Get Marcus on the phone. Tell him the chairman of the board is coming to dinner on Saturday. and tell him to bring the security tapes from the Greenwich house. The estate belongs to the trust, which means the security system belongs to me. I want every second of footage from the last 6 months." "I understand," Leonard said. "Saturday is going to be a bloodbath." "It is not going to be a bloodbath, Leonard," I said, looking at the city skyline. "It is going to be an eviction." I spent the next 3 days in silence. I turned off my phone. I let them stew. I let Bradley think he had won, that I was cowering in some cheap motel, afraid to face him. I let him send threatening texts about cutting off our health insurance, about calling the police on me for kidnapping. I let him dig his grave deeper with every message. I focused on Beatrice. With the fluids and the proper food, and without the toxic drugs in her system, she began to come back to me. The fog lifted. She remembered things. She remembered the insults. She remembered Vanessa watching TV while Bradley yelled at her. She cried a lot, but she was strong. On Friday, I took her shopping. I did not take her to a department store. I took her to a private atelier on Fifth Avenue. I bought her a gown of midnight blue silk hand-stitched. I bought her diamonds, a necklace that cost more than Bradley's stolen Porsche. I hired a stylist to fix her hair and makeup. I bought myself a tuxedo. I trimmed my beard. I stood in the mirror, and I did not see the truck driver anymore. I saw the titan of industry. Saturday evening arrived. It was the night of Bradley's promotion party. He had told me previously that he was hosting the board of directors to celebrate his imminent rise to CEO. He thought he was untouchable. We took the helicopter from Manhattan to a private airfield in Greenwich. A Rolls-Royce Phantom was waiting for us. As we pulled up to the gate of the estate, the security guard, a hired contractor, moved to stop us. He saw the car. He saw me in the back. He opened the gate without a word. We drove up the long driveway. The house was glowing. The party was in full swing. I could hear the clinking of glasses and the murmur of expensive conversation. The car stopped at the front steps, the same steps where my wife had slept on a mat 4 days ago. I squeezed Beatrice's hand. "Are you ready, my love?" She looked at the house. She looked at her diamond bracelet. She looked at me. Her eyes were clear and fierce. "Let's go take out the trash, Clifford." The chauffeur opened the door. We stepped out. I took her arm. We walked up the steps. The front door was open. We walked into the foyer. The chatter died down instantly. The music seemed to fade. Bradley was standing in the center of the room, holding a glass of champagne, holding court with his bosses. He looked up. His jaw dropped. He did not see a beggar. He did not see a truck driver. He saw a man in a $10,000 suit with a woman who looked like a queen. "Clifford," he stammered. "What? Whose car is that? Did you steal that?" I smiled. It was the smile of a wolf looking at a lamb. "Hello, Bradley," I said. "I believe you have something of mine." And the room went deathly silent. The silence of the private medical suite was heavier than the storm I had walked through the night before. I sat in a leather chair that cost more than my first truck, staring at the closed door where my wife lay. The only sound was the rhythmic, sterile beeping of a heart monitor that proved Beatrice was still with me, though barely. Every beep felt like a countdown I didn't know how to stop. I looked at my hands. They were trembling. These hands had steered 18-wheelers through blizzards in the Rockies and signed mergers worth millions in boardrooms in Tokyo, yet now they shook uncontrollably. I kept replaying the image of her on that mat, the way she flinched when I touched her, the way she called our son-in-law sir. The door opened. It wasn't a nurse. It was Dr. Jonathan Evans, the chief of internal medicine at Mount Sinai, and the only man I trusted with my life other than my lawyer. We had played poker together for 20 years. I knew his tell when he was bluffing. He wasn't bluffing now. He looked like he had seen a ghost. He didn't sit behind his desk. He pulled a chair directly in front of me, his knees almost touching mine. He held a thick file in his hands, his knuckles white against the manila folder. He didn't speak for a long time. He just took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose, a gesture of profound exhaustion, and I realized with a jolt of fear, profound anger. "Clifford," he said, his voice low and devoid of its usual warmth. "I have known you and Beatrice for a long time. I have treated dignitaries, celebrities, and royalty. But what I am looking at in this file—" He trailed off, tossing the folder onto the small table between us. It landed with a heavy thud that echoed in the quiet room. "Tell me, John," I said, my voice raspy. "Don't sugarcoat it. Is she dying?" "Not anymore," he said sharply. "But she was getting there, and not by natural causes." He opened the file, pointing to a series of charts and graphs that looked like a foreign language to me. "Let's start with the physical exam," he said. "Beatrice weighs 98 pounds. Clifford. The last time I saw her 6 months ago, she was a healthy 130. She has lost nearly 25% of her body mass. That is not just skipping a few meals. That is starvation." Starvation. The word hung in the air, ugly and brutal. "Her electrolyte levels are critical." He continued, his finger tracing a red line on the page. "She is severely dehydrated. Her skin turgor is non-existent. But that is just the surface. We found evidence of healed fractures in her fingers that were never set properly. We found pressure sores on her heels and lower back, the kind we usually see in patients who are bedridden and neglected in subpar nursing facilities. She has been kept immobile, likely locked in a small space for extended periods." I felt the bile rise in my throat. I gripped the armrests of the chair so hard the leather creaked. They had turned my wife, a woman who loved to dance, who loved to walk in her garden, into a prisoner. "But that is not why I called you in here," John said, his voice dropping an octave. "That is just the neglect. What I found in her blood work. That is the active assault." He flipped the page to a toxicology report. Several columns were highlighted in angry red ink. "We ran a full panel because of her confusion and the dilated pupils you described," he explained. "Clifford, Beatrice isn't senile. She isn't suffering from early-onset dementia or Alzheimer's. Her brain scans are clear. There is no atrophy consistent with those diseases." Then why I whispered. Why didn't she know me? Why was she talking nonsense? "Because she is toxic," John said. "Her blood is saturated with a cocktail of heavy sedatives and antipsychotics." He pointed to the first highlighted name. "Haloperidol. It is a potent antipsychotic used to treat severe schizophrenia or acute mania. It is a chemical restraint, Clifford. In high doses, especially in the elderly, it causes extreme confusion, memory loss, motor control, failure, and lethargy." He moved his finger down. "Benzodiazepines, at 3 times the maximum therapeutic dose. This combination creates a state of twilight anesthesia. The patient is awake but not present. They are suggestible, terrified, and unable to form new memories. It essentially mimics the symptoms of advanced dementia." I stared at the paper, the letters blurring before my eyes. They were drugging her, and I said, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. They weren't just neglecting her. They were poisoning her. John nodded grimly. "This wasn't an accident, Clifford. You don't accidentally ingest these specific drugs in these specific quantities. This was a regimen, a calculated daily dosing designed to keep her docile, confused, and compliant. They were chemically lobotomizing her." Why I asked, though, deep down the shark in me already knew the answer. "To invalidate her," John said, echoing my darkest thoughts. "If she is diagnosed with dementia, if she is seen as incompetent, she loses her legal standing. She cannot control her assets. She cannot testify in court. She becomes a ward of her guardians." I stood up. I couldn't sit anymore. I walked to the window, looking out at the city skyline, but all I could see was Bradley's smirk. All I could see was my daughter Vanessa standing by while her husband poured poison down her mother's throat. "They stole her mind," I said, my voice trembling with a rage so cold it burned. They couldn't just wait for us to die. They had to speed it up. They had to erase her while she was still breathing. John stood up and walked over to me, placing a hand on my shoulder. "The good news is that the damage appears reversible," he said gently. "We have started a flush protocol. As the drugs leave her system, the fog will lift. She will come back to you, Clifford. But it will be painful. She will remember everything. The fear, the confusion, the betrayal." I turned back to him. "Document everything, John. I want photos of every bruise. I want every lab result certified. I want a formal medical opinion stating that her mental state was chemically induced." "I have already started," he assured me. "I am locking this file in my personal safe. No one gets it but you." I looked back at the closed door of Beatrice's room. "She isn't just my wife, John. She is the only good thing I have ever done in my life. And they broke her. They broke her for money." I walked back to the chair and picked up the toxicology report. I folded it carefully and placed it in my inside pocket right next to my heart. It felt heavy there like a stone. "Thank you, John," I said. "Keep her safe. Do not let anyone in to see her, not even if they say they are family, especially if they say they are family." He nodded. "Security is already posted." I walked out of the office and back into the hallway. The hospital air was cool, but my skin felt hot. I checked my phone. There were 12 missed calls from Vanessa. They wanted to play games. They wanted to pretend my wife was crazy so they could lock her away and steal the fortune I had built. They thought they were smart. They thought they were dealing with a senile old truck driver and his confused wife. They had no idea they had just handed me the weapon that would end them. I didn't go back to Beatrice's room immediately. I needed a moment. I leaned against the cold wall of the corridor and closed my eyes. I pictured Bradley's face. I pictured him mixing those pills into her food. I pictured him laughing about the crazy maid. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of antiseptic and floor wax. The grief was gone. The shock was gone. All that was left was a clarity as sharp as a diamond. I took out my phone and dialed the number for my daughter. It was time to hear her lie to me one last time. The phone rang 4 times before she picked up. Each ring felt like a shovel digging a grave for the little girl I used to carry on my shoulders. I was standing in the sterile hallway of the hospital, looking at a vending machine without seeing it, gripping the phone so hard the plastic case creaked. "Hello?" Vanessa's voice was small, tight. It wasn't the voice of a woman. It was the voice of a scared child trying to hide a broken vase. "Vanessa," I said, "I am at the hospital with your mother." There was a pause. A long, heavy silence where I could hear her breathing hitch. Then, instead of asking how her mother was, instead of asking if Beatrice was okay, she whispered, "Dad, you have to bring her back. Bradley he is destroying the house. He is throwing things. He says you kidnapped her." I closed my eyes. The disappointment tasted like ash in my mouth. "He didn't kidnap her, Vanessa," I said, my voice steady and cold. "I rescued her. Dr. Evans just finished his examination. He found the drugs." "What drugs?" she asked, but the feigned ignorance was thin. It cracked immediately. "The antipsychotics," I said. "The sedatives. The poison you and your husband have been feeding her for months to make her docile. To make her look crazy so you could lock her in the basement." "Dad, stop," she hissed. "You don't understand. She was difficult. She was wandering around at night. She was breaking Bradley's things. He said she needed medication to calm down. He said it was standard." "Standard." I interrupted, my voice rising just enough to make a passing nurse look at me. "Starvation is standard. Bruises on her arms are standard. Sleeping on a doormat in the rain is standard. I waited for her to deny it. I waited for her to scream that she didn't know, that she had been blind, that she was sorry. I prayed to a God I hadn't spoken to in years that my daughter was just a victim of a tyrant. But she didn't deny it. She justified it. "He is under a lot of pressure, Dad," she sobbed. "The promotion, the new investors. He couldn't handle the stress of her being around. He needs everything to be perfect. You know how he gets." "And you?" I asked. "You were there, Vanessa. You watched him wipe his mud-covered shoes on your mother's shoulder. I saw your car in the driveway. You were inside drinking wine while she was freezing on the porch. Why didn't you open the door? Why didn't you give her a blanket?" "I couldn't," she cried out. And the truth finally spilled out, ugly and naked. "He threatened me, Dad. He told me that if I undermined him, if I helped her, he would cut me off. He said he would cancel my credit cards. He said he would take the car. I have no money of my own. I have nothing. I couldn't risk it." I stood there, frozen. The phone felt like a block of ice against my ear. "You let him torture the woman who gave you life because you didn't want to lose your allowance?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "You traded your mother's dignity for a leased Range Rover and a pair of shoes. I have to go." She panicked, her voice dropping to a terrified whisper. "I hear his car. Dad, please just bring her back. Don't make him angry. If he loses this deal because of you, he will blame me." "Vanessa," I said, "what, do not call me Dad again." I didn't wait for her response. I ended the call. The silence that followed was absolute. I looked at the black screen of my phone. I had walked into that hospital a father and a husband. Now I was just a husband. The daughter I had raised, the girl whose tuition I had paid, whose tears I had dried, was gone. She hadn't been murdered. She had been bought. She had sold her soul for comfort, and the price tag was her mother's sanity. I put the phone in my pocket. A strange calm settled over me. It was the calm of a man who has nothing left to lose, and therefore has nothing to fear. I had identified the enemy. It wasn't just Bradley. It was the greed that had infested my family like a cancer. I walked back toward Beatrice's room. My steps were heavy, but my resolve was iron. I had cut the rot out of my heart. Now it was time to cut them out of my life. And unlike them, I wouldn't need poison or lies. I had something much more powerful. I had the truth, and I had the receipt for every single thing they owned. The offices of Katz and Associates were perched on the 45th floor of a skyscraper in Midtown Manhattan, a glass and steel fortress that looked down on the city like a silent judge. It was late past midnight, and the cleaning crews had already vacuumed the carpets and emptied the bins, leaving the hallways quiet and dim. But in the corner office, the lights burned bright. I sat across from Leonard Katz, my lawyer for 30 years, and the man who knew where every single one of my bodies was buried, metaphorically speaking. Leonard was a man of few words and even fewer smiles. He wore his three-piece suits like armor and wielded his pen like a sword. Tonight his desk was buried under a mountain of paper. Bank statements, trust deeds, loan agreements, and surveillance reports. Leonard didn't look up when I walked in. He just slid a thick binder across the mahogany desk toward me. It landed with a heavy, ominous thud. "You wanted to know how deep the rot went," he said, his voice gravelly from too much coffee and too little sleep. "Well, here is the biopsy. It is terminal Clifford." I sat down and opened the binder. The first page was a summary of the trust fund I had set up for Vanessa and Bradley 5 years ago. It was designed to cover the maintenance of the Greenwich estate property taxes and a modest stipend for living expenses. It also included an emergency medical fund of $500,000, intended solely for catastrophic health issues. I turned the page to the transaction log. My eyes scanned the columns of numbers, and my blood ran cold. 3 months ago, a withdrawal of $200,000 from the medical fund. The reason listed: urgent surgical procedure for Beatrice Dalton. I looked up at Leonard. Beatrice didn't have surgery 3 months ago. She was recovering from her hip replacement, which I paid for out of my own pocket before I left for Europe. Leonard nodded grimly, I know. Look at the signature authorizing the withdrawal. I looked closer. It was a scrawl that vaguely resembled Beatrice's handwriting, but the loops were too wide, the pressure too uneven. It was a forgery. A clumsy, desperate forgery. He forged her name, I whispered. He stole my wife's identity to rob her blind. Keep reading, Leonard said. I flipped to the next section. It showed where the money went. It didn't go to a hospital. It didn't go to a doctor. It went to a luxury car dealership in New Jersey. A wire transfer for $180,000 for a Porsche 911 GT3. The remaining $20,000 was spent at a high-end jewelry store and a 5-star resort in the Caribbean. He bought a sports car with the money meant to save my wife's life, I said, the rage building in my chest like a pressure cooker. He is driving around in a stolen car while she sleeps on a doormat. It gets worse, Leonard said, pulling another document from a separate stack. This is the deed to the Greenwich house. As you know, the house is held in the trust. Bradley and Vanessa are merely tenants with a lifetime lease contingent on their behavior and adherence to the trust's stipulations. They do not own the title. I nodded. I set it up that way to protect them from themselves. Well, Leonard continued, apparently Bradley didn't read the fine print, or he just didn't care. 6 months ago, he approached a private lending firm, one of those predatory outfits that charge usurious interest rates. He used the house as collateral for a massive business loan. How, I asked. He doesn't have the title. He forged a quitclaim deed, Leonard explained, sliding a copy of the fraudulent document toward me. He transferred the title from the trust to himself using a fake notary stamp and your forged signature. Then he leveraged the property to borrow $1.5 million. $1.5 million. I stared at the number. What did he do with it? He invested it. Leonard said, his tone dripping with disdain. In a cryptocurrency venture that turned out to be a Ponzi scheme. The venture collapsed 2 weeks ago. The money is gone, Clifford. All of it. And now the lenders are calling in the loan. They are threatening to foreclose on the house. I sat back in my chair, stunned by the sheer magnitude of the stupidity and greed. Bradley hadn't just stolen a car. He had effectively stolen the house I bought for my daughter, gambled it away on magic beans, and lost. He was sitting on a ticking time bomb, throwing parties and wiping his shoes on my wife, while the repo men were literally at the gate. So he is broke, I said. He is worse than broke, Leonard corrected. He is insolvent. He is underwater on the car, the house is about to be seized, and he owes creditors nearly $2 million. If the board at Global Tech finds out their CFO is in this kind of financial hole, he will be fired for cause immediately. He is a security risk, and he thinks he is about to be made CEO. I said, a dark laugh escaping my lips. He is desperate, Clifford. That is why he was treating Beatrice like that. That is why he was trying to drug her and lock her away. He needed her out of the way so he could potentially access her personal accounts or life insurance. He is a drowning man trying to climb on top of the only person who can't fight back. I closed the binder. The anger was still there, but it had changed. It had crystallized into something cold and hard and incredibly sharp. I wasn't just mad anymore. I was ready to execute. Leonard, I said, I want you to buy the debt. Leonard blinked. Which debt? All of it. The car loan, the predatory mortgage, the credit cards. Find every single person he owes money to and buy the paper. Use the shell company Obsidian Holdings. Pay them whatever they want. I want to be the only person Bradley owes money to in this world. Leonard smiled. It was a terrifying sight. You want to foreclose on him yourself? No, I said, standing up and walking to the window. Foreclosure takes too long. I want to hold the note. I want to own the paper that proves he is a fraud. When I walk into that party on Saturday, I don't want to just kick him out. I want to strip him naked. I want to show his bosses, his investors, and my daughter exactly what he is. I turned back to Leonard. Prepare the eviction notice. Prepare the civil suit for fraud and elder abuse. And draft a criminal complaint for the forgery and the theft. Have them ready to be filed Monday morning. But for Saturday, I just want the deeds. I want the loan agreements. I want the proof that everything he touches turns to dust. Consider it done, Leonard said, already typing on his computer. By Friday afternoon, you will own him. And Leonard... Yes, get me the contact information for the current CEO of Global Tech, Marcus Sterling. I need to have a little chat with him about his employees' performance review. Leonard nodded. He is playing golf at your club tomorrow morning. I can arrange a tea time. Perfect. I walked out of the office and into the silent hallway. The city lights twinkled below me, a million little stars in a concrete sky. Bradley thought he was a player. He thought he could lie, cheat, and steal his way to the top. He thought he could hurt my wife and get away with it because we were old and weak. He was about to learn the most important lesson of business. Never leverage what you don't own, and never ever underestimate the silent partner. I pushed the button for the elevator. The doors slid open with a soft chime. I stepped inside and watched the numbers count down. 45, 44, 43. Going down, Bradley. Going all the way down. The silence in the hotel suite was heavy, not with tension, but with the weight of waiting. I had turned off my phone 3 days ago, severing the only digital umbilical cord that connected me to the leech living in my house. It sat on the marble desk like a black brick, a silent testament to my refusal to play his game. I knew men like Bradley. I knew that silence to a narcissist is worse than an insult. It is a vacuum they feel compelled to fill with their own noise, their own fears, and eventually their own arrogance. Beatrice was resting, the color slowly returning to her cheeks, thanks to real food and the absence of the poison they had been feeding her. I sat by the window, watching the rain streak the glass, imagining the scene back in Greenwich. I could picture Bradley pacing the floors of my house, checking his phone every 5 minutes, his rage slowly boiling over into panic, and then settling into a smug, delusional certainty. I finally reached out and powered on the device. It buzzed against the mahogany wood, a frantic, angry insect coming back to life. The notifications cascaded down the screen in a torrent of abuse. 57 text messages, 20 voicemails. It was a timeline of a man unraveling. I scrolled to the beginning, reading them chronologically. Tuesday morning started with annoyance. Where the hell are you? You need to bring her back. The investors are asking questions. By Tuesday afternoon, the annoyance had curdled into threats. If you don't answer me in 10 minutes, I am canceling the health insurance policy. I hope you have deep pockets, Clifford, because her meds aren't cheap. You are going to kill her with your stubbornness. I let out a short, dry laugh. He thought he held the purse strings. He had no idea the insurance was paid directly by the trust he had tried to loot. He was threatening to cut a cord that he didn't even hold. Wednesday brought the legal bluster. I spoke to my lawyer. What you are doing is kidnapping. Taking a vulnerable, mentally incompetent adult without guardian consent is a felony. Bring her back or I am calling the police. Do you want to die in prison? Old man, I almost wished he would call the police. I had the toxicology report from Dr. Evans in my pocket. I had the photos of the bruises. If the police showed up, Bradley wouldn't be pressing charges. He would be wearing handcuffs. But I knew he wouldn't make the call. Bullies like him thrived in the dark. He didn't want authorities poking around the house where he kept his mother-in-law on a mat. He just wanted to scare me into submission. By Thursday, the tone shifted again. The threats stopped. The panic evaporated. In its place was a terrifying, unearned arrogance. He had interpreted my silence not as strategy, but as cowardice. He thought I had run away. He thought I was cowering in some cheap motel, too broke and too scared to face him. Fine, the message from Thursday night read, "Don't come back. We are better off without you leeches." I changed the locks this morning. I told security that if they see your old truck, they are to trespass you immediately. Enjoy the homeless shelter. And don't worry about the house. I will take good care of it now that it is finally mine. Finally mine. He truly believed it. He thought he had won. He thought he had successfully flushed us out like rats. He was probably walking through the halls right now, measuring the walls for new art, planning his victory lap at the party on Saturday. He had absolutely no idea that the ground beneath his feet had already been sold out from under him. I looked over at Beatrice. She was awake, watching me with clear, intelligent eyes. The fog of the drugs was lifting, revealing the steel spine I had fallen in love with 40 years ago. "Is he still barking?" she asked softly. "He thinks we ran away," I said. "He thinks he scared us off." "Good," she said, smoothing the duvet cover. "Let him think he is the king of the castle. It will make the fall that much harder." I typed out a single response. I didn't want to argue. I didn't want to tip my hand. I just needed to ensure he didn't cancel the party. I needed an audience for what was about to happen. "We will be there Saturday," I typed. "We will not be a burden anymore." It was the truth, just not the way he understood it. We wouldn't be a burden because we would be the owners. I hit send and watched the delivery receipt tick over. Then I turned the phone off again. The trap was set. The bait was taken. Now all I had to do was wait for the music to start. The next 48 hours were not spent resting. They were spent forging a weapon, and that weapon was my wife. The withdrawal from the antipsychotics was brutal. For the first day, Beatrice shook so hard she could barely hold a cup of tea. She sweat through the high thread count sheets of the hotel bed, muttering about the cold, about the basement, about the shadows in the corner of the room. I sat by her side, wiping her forehead with a cool cloth, whispering to her that she was safe, that the monsters were gone, that the only thing waiting for her now was justice. By Friday morning, the fever broke. The fog that had obscured her mind for months finally lifted. I saw it happen in real time. I was reading a newspaper by the window when she sat up. She didn't look around with the terrified, darting eyes of a trapped animal anymore. She looked at me and her gaze was steady. It was the gaze of the woman who had helped me build a logistics empire from a single flatbed truck. "I remember everything, Cliff," she said, her voice raspy but firm. "I remember him laughing at me. I remember Vanessa turning up the volume on the television so she wouldn't hear me crying at the door." I put down the paper. "We are going to fix it, B. Tomorrow night." She nodded, swinging her legs out of bed. Her steps were still tentative, but she stood tall. "I do not want to go back there looking like a victim," she said. "I do not want them to see a frail old woman they can pity or dismiss. I want to walk into that house looking like the person who owns the mortgage." I smiled. "I have arranged for that." At noon, a team arrived at the suite. I didn't hire a local salon. I hired the team that preps models for Vogue covers. They set up lights and mirrors in the living room. Beatrice sat in the chair, and I watched as they went to work. It wasn't about vanity. It was about reconstruction. They dyed her graying, matted hair a rich, vibrant chestnut, styling it into a sharp, elegant bob that framed her face with authority. They applied creams and serums to her skin, erasing the gray pallor of malnutrition and replacing it with a healthy glow. The makeup artist, a young man who worked in silence, paused when he saw the yellowing bruise on her cheekbone. He looked at me, then at Beatrice. He didn't ask questions. He simply selected a palette and blended the mark away until her skin looked flawless. When Beatrice looked in the mirror 3 hours later, the maid was gone. The crazy old woman was gone. Staring back was a matriarch. She looked 10 years younger and 100 times more dangerous. Then came the clothes. I had called in a favor from a personal shopper at Bergdorf Goodman. They brought a rack of gowns to the suite zipped into black garment bags like secrets. Beatrice didn't want florals. She didn't want pastels. She chose a floor-length gown of midnight blue velvet, structured and imposing, with long sleeves that hid the bruises on her arms, and a high collar that gave her the air of royalty. It was a dress that cost $12,000. It was a dress that said, "Do not touch me." To finish the look, I opened the safe in the room. I took out a velvet box I had retrieved from my private vault that morning. Inside was a diamond and sapphire necklace set in platinum. It was heavy, ostentatious, and undeniably expensive. I fastened it around her neck. Ideally, I prefer modesty, but for tomorrow we needed armor. This necklace was a shield made of light. "You look terrifying," I told her. "Good," she replied, touching the cold stones at her throat. "I want them to be terrified." While Beatrice was transforming, I had my own preparations to make. I wasn't going back to Greenwich as Clifford, the truck driver. I was going back as Clifford Dalton, chairman of Trident Holdings. I called a private security firm, one that specialized in executive protection for high-risk zones. I didn't want mall cops. I wanted professionals. I hired 4 men. Ex-military, big silent types who wore earpieces and looked like they could break a neck without changing their facial expression. "I want you at the estate at 7 sharp, I told the lead agent. "You wait at the gate. When my car arrives, you flank us. No one touches my wife. If my son-in-law so much as takes a step toward her, you put him on the ground. Do you understand loud and clear, Mr. Dalton?" Next was the transport. I didn't want an Uber. I didn't want a town car. I called a luxury rental service that catered to diplomats. I requested a Rolls-Royce Phantom, black, tinted windows, the kind of car that parts traffic just by existing. I wanted Bradley to hear the engine purr before he even saw us. I wanted him to see the Spirit of Ecstasy hood ornament and know that he was out of his league. But the most important call was the last one, the final nail in the coffin. I sat at the desk and dialed a number I hadn't used in 6 months. It rang twice. "Clifford." The voice was surprised. It was Marcus Sterling, the CEO of Global Tech Solutions, the man Bradley spent every waking moment trying to impress. "Hello, Marcus," I said. "I apologize for the short notice. I am in town." "Clifford, it is an honor. I thought you were still in Zurich. To what do I owe the pleasure? Is everything all right with the acquisition?" "Everything is fine," I said. "But I have a personal matter to attend to. I understand you are attending a dinner party tomorrow night in Greenwich, at the home of your CFO Bradley." Marcus hesitated. "Yes, actually. It is a bit of a celebration. We are announcing his promotion to the board on Monday. He has been pushing for you to meet him, actually. He says he has turned the finances around." I let out a short, cold laugh. "He has certainly done something with finances, Marcus. Listen to me carefully. I am coming to that dinner. You are, that is wonderful. Bradley will be over the moon. I am not coming to celebrate, Marcus. I am coming to audit." There was a long silence on the line. The tone of the conversation shifted instantly from friendly to icy corporate seriousness. "Audit?" Marcus asked carefully. "Clifford." "What is going on? I want you to be there, Marcus. I want you to stand in the front row, and I want you to bring the termination paperwork for a C-level executive." Termination. For Bradley. But his numbers. His numbers are a lie, Marcus. He is insolvent. He has leveraged company assets. He is being investigated for fraud and elder abuse. And the house he is hosting this party in, it belongs to me, and I am evicting him tomorrow night. "Good God," Marcus whispered. "I need you to witness this, Marcus. I need the board to see exactly who they were about to hand the keys to." "Can I count on you? I will be there, Clifford," Marcus said, his voice steel. "And I will bring legal." "Good. See you at 7. I hung up the phone. I stood up and walked to the mirror. I had shaved off my scruffy retirement beard. I was wearing a bespoke tuxedo that I hadn't worn since a gala in Vienna. I adjusted the cufflinks' solid gold knots that caught the light. The truck driver was gone. The father was gone. The only thing left in the mirror was the chairman. I walked out into the living room. Beatrice was standing by the window looking out at the city. She turned to look at me. The blue velvet dress swished around her feet. The diamonds blazed at her throat. She looked regal. She looked powerful. She looked ready for war. "The car is ready," she asked. "It is downstairs," I said. "Then let's go," she said, picking up a small clutch purse. "I believe we have a party to crash." While my wife was being transformed into a queen by a team of stylists in the master suite. I sat in the adjoining study, orchestrating the final movement of a symphony that would end in my son-in-law's total destruction. I had the eviction notice. I had the civil suit. I had the toxicology report. But I needed one more thing. I needed a cage that he could not talk his way out of. Bradley was a slippery creature. I knew his type. He was the kind of man who could look a judge in the eye and claim that the drugs in Beatrice's system were a mistake, a pharmaceutical error, a misunderstanding. He would claim the forged withdrawal from the trust was a loan he intended to pay back. He would play the victim. He would blame the stress of his job. He might even get off with probation and a slap on the wrist. I did not want probation. I wanted federal prison. I wanted a felony so undeniable, so documented, and so egregious that no lawyer on earth could save him. To get that, I had to bait a trap with the only thing Bradley loved more than himself: money. I picked up the phone and dialed a number that belonged to a man who owed me a life debt. Artie Vance was a retired hedge fund manager, a shark who had swum in the deepest, darkest waters of Wall Street for 40 years before retiring to a vineyard in Napa. He was ruthless, charming, and a consummate actor. Years ago, I had bailed his firm out of a liquidity crisis that would have ruined him. He had told me then, "Cliff, if you ever need a body buried or a bank bought, you call me." I did not need a body buried. I needed a fish to bite. "Artie," I said when he answered, "it is time." "I am ready, Liff." Artie's voice rasped, rich with the thrill of the hunt. I am sitting across the street from the coffee shop now. He is walking in. He looks nervous. He keeps checking his watch. "Perfect," I said. "Remember, he is desperate. He needs $5 million to cover his debts and buy his way into the CEO chair. He will agree to anything. But you have to make him sign." "Do not worry." Artie chuckled. "I brought the gold fountain pen. It adds a nice touch of legitimacy to the execution." I hung up and opened my laptop. Artie was wearing a wire. I put on my noise-canceling headphones and listened. I needed to hear the exact moment Bradley sold his soul. Through the static, I heard the bell of the coffee shop door chime. I heard the scrape of a chair. Mr. Vance Bradley's voice came through, breathless and eager. "It is an honor, truly. I cannot tell you how much I appreciate you flying in to meet me on such short notice." "Sit down, kid," Artie said, his voice booming with the unearned confidence of a billionaire. "I do not have much time. My jet leaves for Teterboro in an hour. You said you have an opportunity. Pitch me, but make it quick. I am allergic to PowerPoint presentations." I closed my eyes, visualizing the scene. Bradley sweating in his expensive suit, trying to charm a man who ate CEOs for breakfast. "It is a fintech play," Bradley launched into his spiel, his voice gaining that oily salesman cadence. "We call it Ledger Lock. It uses blockchain to secure high-frequency trades. The algorithm is proprietary. We are projecting a 10x return in the first 6 months. I just need the seed capital to scale the servers. $5 million gets you 30% equity." He was lying. There was no Ledger Lock. It was vaporware, a shell company he had set up to launder the money he hoped to steal. Artie let him ramble for 2 minutes. Then he cut him off with a bored sigh. Kid, stop, Artie said. I do not care about the tech. I have guys in Silicon Valley who handle the tech. I invest in people. And frankly, you look like a man who is running out of road. There was a silence. I could hear Bradley swallow. I do not know what you mean, sir. Do not insult me, Artie snapped. I ran a background check. You are leveraged up to your eyeballs. You have creditors circling. You are hungry. I like hungry. Hungry men take risks, but hungry men also make mistakes. I have some temporary liquidity issues, Bradley stammered. Just a cash flow timing thing. Once the bonus hits, I do not care about your bonus. Artie interrupted. I am willing to write you a check for $5 million. Right now. Today. I heard Bradley gasp. 5 million, yes. But I do not do unsecured lending. I need collateral, real collateral, not some imaginary algorithm. Collateral, Bradley's voice wavered. Assets, kid. Hard assets, real estate. I hear you live in a very nice estate in Greenwich. Prime location. Market value somewhere north of 6 million. My heart began to hammer against my ribs. This was the moment. The turn. Yes, Bradley said quickly. Yes, the house. It is magnificent. Is it yours? Artie asked. The question was a razor blade hidden in a bouquet of flowers. Yes, Bradley lied. Without hesitation, without a stutter. Yes, it is mine. Free and clear. 100%. Good, Artie said. Then we have a deal. I have the papers right here. It is a standard bridge loan agreement. You pledge the deed to the Greenwich estate as collateral for the $5 million investment. If the company succeeds, you pay me back with interest. If it fails, I take the house. There was the sound of paper rustling. I just need your signature right here, Artie said. And I need you to sign this affidavit stating that you are the sole legal owner of the property and that you have the authority to leverage it. This was the trap. Lying in a conversation was one thing. Signing a legal document pledging an asset you did not own to secure funds was bank fraud and wire fraud. It was a federal crime carrying a sentence of up to 30 years. I held my breath. Would he do it? Would his greed override his survival instinct? He knew the house belonged to the trust. He knew he was just a tenant. But he also knew that $5 million would solve all his problems. It would pay off the Porsche, cover the debts, and leave him with millions to play the big shot. He just had to gamble that he could pay Artie back before anyone checked the deed. I own it, Bradley said, his voice dropping to a whisper. It was a gift from my wife's parents. They are out of the picture now. Out of the picture. I felt a flash of cold hatred so intense my vision blurred. He thought we were dead or gone. He was selling my house, my legacy, on the assumption that I was too weak to stop him. Then sign, Artie said. The scratch of the pen on paper was loud in my headphones. It sounded like a zipper closing on a body bag. There, Bradley said, his voice trembling with adrenaline. Signed. Artie laughed. A big, boisterous sound. Welcome to the big leagues, kid. My office will wire the funds on Monday morning. Enjoy your party tonight. I hear it is going to be quite the event. You heard about the party? I hear everything, kid. Now get out of here. I have a plane to catch. I heard the chair scrape again. I heard Bradley's footsteps retreating fast and light. He was probably floating on air. He thought he had just pulled off the deal of the century. He thought he was $5 million richer. The door chimed. Cliff Artie's voice came through the earpiece, calm and deadly. I am here, Artie. I have the document in my hand, he said, notarized by my associate at the next table. He pledged the deed. He signed the affidavit of ownership. It is done. Thank you, Artie. He is going to jail, Cliff. Artie said quietly. This paper. This is a smoking gun. He just defrauded a private equity firm. The FBI will eat him alive. That is the plan, I said. I will scan it and send it to your secure server within 5 minutes. Give him hell tonight. I took off the headphones. I sat in the silence of the hotel room. It was done. Bradley wasn't just a bad son-in-law anymore. He was a felon. He had walked into a coffee shop, a free man, and walked out a federal target. I looked at the clock. It was 5 p.m. The party started at 7. I stood up and walked to the window. The sun was setting over the city, casting long shadows across the buildings. I felt a strange sense of detachment. I wasn't angry anymore. I was simply inevitable. Bradley had spent years building a house of cards. He had lied to his wife, abused his in-laws, stolen from his employer, and defrauded investors. He thought he was building a tower to heaven. He didn't realize he was just stacking kindling for a bonfire. And I was bringing the match. I walked into the bedroom. Beatrice was standing in front of the full-length mirror. She turned to look at me. The blue velvet gown hugged her frame, giving her the silhouette of a warrior queen. The diamonds at her throat caught the last rays of the sun, sparkling like cold fire. Is it time? She asked. I nodded, adjusting my cufflinks. He signed, I said. He tried to sell the house. She didn't look surprised. She just looked determined. Then let us go take it back, she said. We walked out of the suite, 2 ghosts returning from the grave to haunt the man who had dug it. We took the elevator down to the lobby where the Rolls-Royce was waiting. The driver held the door open. I helped Beatrice inside, ensuring her dress didn't catch on the sill. As the car pulled away from the curb and headed toward the highway that led to Greenwich, I took out my phone. I had one last message to send. I opened the contact for Leonard Katz. He signed, I typed. File the criminal complaint. And send the digital copy of the fraud affidavit to Marcus Sterling's phone right now. I want him to read it before we walk through the door. I hit send. The trap was sprung. The cage door was closed. Now all that was left was to turn on the lights and let the world see the rat I had caught. The Rolls-Royce moved silently up the long, winding driveway, the gravel crunching softly beneath tires that cost more than most people's annual rent. Through the tinted glass, I watched the estate glowing against the night sky. It looked like a castle from a fairy tale bathed in golden light, the architectural details I had paid for highlighted by strategically placed floodlights. It was a beautiful house. It was a house built for a family to grow old in, to share meals in, to build memories in. Instead, it had become a stage for a predator to parade around in a borrowed skin. We stopped just outside the circle of light cast by the portico. I signaled the driver to kill the engine but keep the lights off. I wanted to watch for a moment. I wanted to see the court of the Crimson King before the walls came tumbling down. The front doors were wide open, spilling light and noise into the cool evening air. I could see the guests mingling in the foyer and the great room beyond. There were men in bespoke suits and women in gowns that shimmered like liquid metal. These were the power players of Greenwich, the board members of Global Tech, the investors Bradley had been courting with lies and my money. I lowered the window just an inch. The sound of applause drifted out. Bradley was making a speech. I gestured to Beatrice. We stepped out of the car into the shadows, moving quietly toward the open doors. The security team I had hired was already in position at the perimeter, invisible sentinels waiting for my signal. We stopped just outside the threshold, hidden by the massive stone pillars that flanked the entrance. From here, we had a perfect view of the center of the room. Bradley stood on the grand staircase elevated above his guests, like a monarch addressing his subjects. He held a crystal flute of champagne in one hand, his other hand resting casually on the mahogany banister. He looked flushed, victorious. He looked like a man who believed he had just secured $5 million and a CEO title. Success, Bradley was saying, his voice projecting smooth and confident over the hushed crowd, is not just about the numbers on a balance sheet. It is about character. It is about the resilience to keep pushing forward when the world tries to drag you down. When I look around this room, I see partners who understand that vision. I see the future of global tech. There was a ripple of polite applause. Bradley basked in it, taking a sip of his champagne before his expression shifted into something practiced and somber. He was pivoting to the sympathy card. I had seen him do it a dozen times, but never with stakes this high. But success comes with a price, he continued, his voice dropping to a register of false humility. You all know that Vanessa and I have faced significant personal challenges this week. It is no secret that we have been caring for her elderly parents for years. We opened our home to them. We gave them a sanctuary here on this estate because we believe that family takes care of family, no matter the cost. I felt Beatrice stiffen beside me. I placed my hand over hers on my arm, feeling the cold fire of her diamonds against my palm. My father-in-law, Clifford, was a simple man. Bradley went on, shaking his head with a sigh that was perfectly choreographed. A truck driver his whole life. He never understood this world. He never understood the pressure or the responsibility. And my mother-in-law, poor Beatrice. Her mind has been failing for some time. We tried everything. We hired the best doctors. We converted the guest cottage into a state-of-the-art facility for her comfort. Lies. Every word was a toxic lie. He converted the guest cottage into a storage unit and made her sleep on a mat. But dementia is a cruel thief, Bradley said, looking down at Vanessa, who was standing at the foot of the stairs, staring at the floor, a glass of wine clutched in her hand like a lifeline. She looked pale, small, and completely defeated. She knew the truth, and yet she stood there and let him desecrate us. This week, their paranoia got the better of them. Bradley lied, his voice thick with fake emotion. They became aggressive, confused. They refused our help. And 3 days ago, they ran away. They vanished into the night because they could not accept the care we were trying so desperately to provide. We have hired private investigators to find them, of course. We are paying for their search out of our own pockets because we just want them safe. We just want to bring them home to the facility where they can get the help they need. The crowd murmured in sympathy. I heard a woman near the door whisper, "He is such a saint. I do not know how he does it." It breaks my heart, Bradley said, placing a hand over his chest. To offer someone the world, to offer them dignity and comfort, only to have them spit in your face because they are too far gone to understand what you are giving them. But that is the burden of leadership, isn't it? We carry the weight for those who cannot carry it themselves. We make the hard choices. We protect the weak even when they do not want to be protected. He raised his glass higher. So tonight, do not just drink to global tech. Drink to resilience. Drink to the sacrifices we make in the shadows so that we can stand in the light. To family. And to the future which belongs to those strong enough to seize it. Hear, hear, the crowd cheered. Glasses clinked. Bradley beamed, drinking deep from his flute, savoring the taste of his own deception. He thought he was untouchable. He thought he had spun a narrative so perfect that no one would ever look under the rug to see the dirt he had swept there. He lowered his glass and looked down at Vanessa. She forced a weak smile, raising her glass to him, in a toast that looked more like a surrender. I looked at Beatrice. Her eyes were dry, but they burned with a ferocity that could level cities. She didn't look frail anymore. She didn't look confused. She looked like an executioner who had just sharpened her blade. "He thinks we are gone," she whispered, her voice low and steady. "He thinks we are ghosts." I adjusted my cufflinks, feeling the weight of the moment settle onto my shoulders. "Then let us show him what a haunting really looks like," I said. I signaled the security team. The lead agent nodded and stepped forward, pushing the heavy oak doors open until they hit the stops with a resounding boom that echoed through the foyer like a cannon shot. The chatter stopped instantly. The clinking of glasses ceased. Every head in the room turned toward the door. Bradley froze on the staircase, his glass halfway to his mouth, annoyance flashing across his face at the interruption. but the annoyance vanished the moment he saw us. We stood framed in the doorway, the night air swirling around us. I was in my tuxedo, standing tall, the master of the house returning to reclaim his throne. And beside me, Beatrice shone in midnight blue velvet and diamonds, a queen risen from the ashes of his abuse. The silence was absolute. It was the silence of a held breath. It was the silence of a lie shattering into a million pieces. I took one step forward, the sound of my dress shoe on the marble floor echoing like a gavel striking a bench. "Hello, Bradley," I said, my voice carrying to the back of the room without effort. "I believe you were just talking about us." The silence that followed my greeting was not empty. It was heavy, suffocating, sucking the air out of the room like a vacuum. It was the sound of 100 carefully constructed lies shattering all at once against the hard reality of the truth. Bradley stared at me. His mouth hung slightly open, a caricature of shock. The crystal flute in his hand tilted dangerously, a single drop of expensive champagne spilling onto his polished shoe, but he did not notice. He could not notice. His brain was trying to reconcile two impossible images. The image of the dirty, broken old man he had thrown out into the rain 3 days ago, and the image of the Titan standing before him now. I stepped fully into the light of the chandelier. The custom tuxedo fit me like armor. The silk lapels caught the glow, the gold cufflinks gleamed. I stood tall, my spine straightened by righteous anger shedding the stoop of the weary truck driver I had played for so long. But I was just the frame. Beatrice was the masterpiece. She stepped in beside me, her hand resting lightly on my arm. The midnight blue velvet gown flowed around her like water, the deep color making her skin look like porcelain. Her hair, no longer gray and matted, was a rich chestnut halo around her face. And the diamonds. God, the diamonds. The necklace I had taken from the vault blazed under the lights, a constellation of cold fire at her throat that drew every eye in the room. A gasp rippled through the crowd. It started near the door and spread outward like a wave. These were people who knew money. They knew quality. They recognized the cut of the dress, the clarity of the stones, the sheer, undeniable aura of wealth that radiated from us. Is that her?" I heard a woman whisper near the front. "The maid." "She does not look like a maid," a man muttered back. "She looks like a queen." We began to walk. We did not rush. We moved with the slow, deliberate pace of predators who know their prey has nowhere to run. The security team I had hired stayed at the perimeter, silent sentinels in black suits, their presence adding a layer of menacing professionalism to our arrival. The guests parted for us instinctively. They stepped back, pressing against the walls, clearing a wide path to the bottom of the grand staircase where Bradley and Vanessa stood frozen. I looked at the faces as we passed. I saw confusion. I saw awe. And in the eyes of the board members of Global Tech, I saw recognition. They were looking at me, then looking at each other, the realization dawning on them like a slow-motion car crash. Vanessa was the first to break. She made a small, choked sound, bringing her hand to her mouth. She looked at her mother. She looked at the woman she had watched sleep on a doormat. The woman she had allowed to be drugged and starved. She saw the strength in Beatrice's eyes, the clarity, and she shrank back. She tried to hide behind Bradley, but there was no hiding from this. "Mom," she whispered the word, trembling in the silence. Beatrice did not look at her. She kept her eyes fixed on Bradley. We reached the center of the room, stopping 10 feet from the stairs. I could see the sweat beading on Bradley's forehead. I could see the pulse jumping in his neck. He looked at the Rolls-Royce visible through the open door behind us. He looked at the security guards. He looked at the diamonds. "Clifford!" He croaked, his voice a shadow of the booming baritone he had used just moments ago. "What? What is this? Where did you get those clothes? Did you rent them? Is this some kind of sick joke?" He was trying to claw back control. He was trying to frame this as a desperate stunt by a crazy old man, but his voice lacked conviction. It wobbled with fear. I smiled. It was a cold smile, devoid of warmth. No joke, Bradley, I said, my voice projecting clearly to the back of the room. Just a correction. You seem to be under the impression that my wife and I were destitute, that we were helpless, that we were— What was the word you used, leeches? I took a step closer. He took a step back, nearly tripping on the stair riser. I thought I should come and clear up the misunderstanding personally, I continued. And since you invited the entire board of directors of Global Tech, I thought it was the perfect opportunity to introduce myself properly. I turned my head, slightly locking eyes with Marcus Sterling, who was standing near the fireplace, a glass of untouched scotch in his hand. He looked pale, but he nodded at me a sharp, respectful acknowledgement. Bradley saw the look. He saw his boss, the CEO he worshipped, bowing his head to his father-in-law. The color drained from his face completely, leaving him gray and ashen. I turned back to Bradley. You see, Bradley, you made a mistake. You looked at a book and judged it by its cover. You looked at a man who drove a truck and assumed he was poor. You looked at a woman who loved to garden and assumed she was weak. And because of that assumption, you thought you could hurt us. You thought you could steal from us. You thought you could erase us. I reached into my tuxedo pocket. The sound of the fabric rustling was loud in the quiet room. Bradley flinched as if he expected me to pull out a gun. Instead, I pulled out a folded document, the affidavit he had signed in the coffee shop 3 days ago. But you forgot the first rule of finance, Bradley, I said, holding the paper up. Always know who holds the note. Bradley stared at the paper. He recognized it. I saw the moment his soul left his body. You signed this, didn't you? I asked softly. You pledged this house as collateral for a $5 million loan. A house you do not own. A house that belongs to a trust. He stammered, looking around the room for an ally, for someone to laugh and tell him this was a nightmare. But no one laughed. The investors were staring at him with cold, predatory eyes. They smelled blood. And you know who owns the trust, Bradley? I asked. I do. I let the words hang there. I let him do the math. If I owned the trust, I owned the house. If I owned the house, I owned him. Vanessa started to cry. It was a high, thin sound, like a kettle boiling over. Dad, please, she sobbed. Don't do this. Not here. Not in front of everyone. I looked at her then. I looked at my daughter. You had your chance, Vanessa, I said, my voice devoid of pity. You had a chance when she was shivering on the porch. You had a chance when he was drugging her food. You chose your side. Now you have to live with the consequences. I turned back to the room. I raised my voice, addressing the guests, the board members, the elite of Greenwich. Ladies and gentlemen, I said, I apologize for the interruption. My son-in-law was just telling you about the future of global tech, about character, about resilience. I gestured to Bradley, who was now trembling, visibly leaning against the banister for support. But I think there is something you should know before you toast to his success. I looked at Marcus Sterling. Marcus, I said, would you mind joining us? The crowd parted again. Marcus Sterling walked forward. He didn't look at Bradley. He looked at me. Mr. Dalton, he said, extending his hand. I shook it. Mr. Sterling, I said, I believe you have some paperwork for your CFO. Bradley made a noise that sounded like a dying animal. Mr. Dalton, he whispered. You know him. Marcus turned to Bradley. His face was a mask of professional disgust. Bradley, he said coldly, I would like to introduce you to Clifford Dalton, the chairman of Trident Holdings, our parent company. Bradley's knees gave out. He sat down hard on the stairs, burying his face in his hands. He owns Global Tech, Bradley. Marcus continued mercilessly. He owns the company. He signs your paychecks. And tonight I said, stepping forward until I was standing over him, my shadow falling across his crumpled form. Tonight I am here to fire you. The gasp from the crowd was audible this time. Beatrice squeezed my arm. I looked at her. She was smiling. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of justice. But we are not just firing you, Bradley, I said, leaning down so only he in the front row could hear. We are evicting you. I pulled another document from my pocket. The eviction notice Leonard had drafted. I dropped it onto his lap. It landed with a soft slap. Get out of my house, I said. The document fluttered onto Bradley's lap like a dead bird. He stared at it, his hands shaking so violently he couldn't even pick it up. The eviction notice. The end of his reign. But I wasn't done. The eviction was just the opening act. The main event was about to begin. I turned away from him, leaving him crumpled on the stairs, and walked toward the small stage where a jazz trio had been playing earlier. The musicians had stopped their instruments lowered, watching the drama unfold with wide eyes. I reached out and took the microphone from its stand. Testing, I said. My voice boomed through the speakers, filling every corner of the cavernous room. I looked out at the sea of faces. These were the people Bradley had preened for. These were the people he had tried to impress with his borrowed wealth and his stolen stories. You know, I began my tone conversational, but edged with steel. My son-in-law here has a very interesting definition of family. He told you earlier that family takes care of family. He told you he was a saint for taking in his poor demented in-laws. I paused, letting the silence stretch. I looked directly at a woman in the front row who was clutching her pearls. But he left out a few details. He forgot to mention that the sanctuary he provided was a storage shed without heat. He forgot to mention that the care he provided involved drugging my wife with antipsychotics to simulate dementia. And he certainly forgot to mention that the money he used to throw this party, to buy his suits, to lease his cars, it didn't come from his salary. It came from stealing his mother-in-law's retirement fund. A collective gasp went through the room. Bradley made a strangled noise trying to stand up, but his legs wouldn't cooperate. That's a lie, he screamed, his voice cracking. He's crazy! Don't listen to him. He's senile. I smiled. It was the smile of a man holding 4 aces. Senile, I asked. That's an interesting diagnosis, Bradley, especially coming from a man who just signed a federal affidavit pledging a property he doesn't own to secure a fraudulent loan. I reached into my pocket and pulled out another document. The affidavit from the coffee shop. I held it up for the room to see. This is a sworn statement notarized 3 days ago, in which Bradley declares himself the sole owner of this estate. He used it to try and borrow $5 million from a private equity firm. I walked over to Marcus Sterling. Marcus, I said, you're a businessman. What do you call it when an executive leverages assets he doesn't control to cover personal debts? Marcus took the microphone from me. His face was grim. We call it embezzlement, Clifford. And we call it fraud. He turned to the crowd. For those of you who don't know, he said, his voice ringing with authority, I am Marcus Sterling, CEO of Global Tech Solutions, and the man standing next to me is not just a truck driver. He gestured to me. This is Clifford Dalton. He is the founder and chairman of Trident Holdings. Trident acquired Global Tech 6 months ago, which means he turned to look at Bradley, who was now clinging to the banister like a drowning man on a raft. Which means, Bradley, that Clifford isn't just your father-in-law. He is your boss. He owns the company you work for. He owns the building your office is in. He owns the chair you sit in. The realization hit Bradley like a physical blow. His eyes bulged. His mouth opened and closed soundlessly. The arrogance, the smug superiority, it all evaporated in an instant, leaving behind only naked terror. You, he stammered. You can't be. You drive a truck. You wear flannel. I laughed. It was a harsh sound. I drive a truck because I like the road, Bradley. I wear flannel because it's comfortable. But don't mistake my hobbies for my net worth. I built an empire while you were still learning how to tie your tie. I have negotiated with unions, with cartels, with governments. Do you really think a little thief like you could outsmart me? I walked back to him. I leaned down, bringing my face close to his. You called us leeches, I whispered. You said we were a burden. You wiped your shoes on my wife. And all the while you were living in my house, spending my money, working for my company. Who is the leech, Bradley? Who is the parasite? He shrank back, whimpering. I didn't know, he sobbed. I swear I didn't know. If I had known... If you had known I was rich, you would have treated me with respect, I asked. Is that it? You only treat people like human beings if they have a big enough bank account. That is exactly the problem, Bradley. That is why you are finished. Not because you stole, but because you are cruel. You are a small, cruel man who thought he found a victim. But you found a judge. I straightened up and looked at Marcus. Marcus, I think it's time for that performance review. Marcus nodded. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a sleek black envelope. He walked up the stairs, stopping one step below Bradley. Bradley, he said formally. Effective immediately, your employment with Global Tech is terminated for cause. We have uncovered significant financial irregularities in your department. Unauthorized transfers. Falsified expense reports using company funds to cover personal gambling debts. Gambling debts! Vanessa shrieked from the bottom of the stairs. She looked at her husband with horror. You told me you were investing. Was! Bradley yelled back, desperate. It was a sure thing, I just needed more time. Marcus ignored the outburst. Security is already clearing out your officer, Bradley. Your company accounts are frozen, and our legal team has already forwarded our findings to the district attorney. You are facing charges of corporate embezzlement, wire fraud, and securities fraud. He handed the envelope to Bradley. Bradley didn't take it. It fell to the floor, landing next to the eviction notice. Get out, Marcus said, but the show wasn't over. I had one more player to introduce. I looked toward the back of the room. Leonard Katz was standing there holding a briefcase. He nodded to me. Ladies and gentlemen, I said into the microphone, there is one more thing. My son-in-law seems to think this house is his. He seems to think he has rights here. I beckoned Leonard forward. This is Leonard Katz, my attorney. Leonard, would you please explain the current legal status of the residents of this estate? Leonard walked to the center of the room. He didn't need a microphone. His voice was projected with the practiced clarity of a courtroom veteran. The property is held in a blind trust, Leonard stated. The trust agreement contains a morality clause. It states that tenancy is contingent upon the residents maintaining a standard of ethical conduct and providing adequate care for any family members residing on the premises. He opened his briefcase and pulled out a stack of photos. He held them up. They were the photos Dr. Evans had taken. The bruises on Beatrice's arms, the bed sores, the malnutrition. Based on the evidence of severe elder abuse, neglect, and chemical assault collected by medical professionals, Leonard continued, the trust has invoked the immediate termination clause. Bradley and Vanessa are hereby evicted. They are trespassing as of this moment. He turned to the security team I had hired. Gentlemen, please escort the trespassers off the property. Bradley scrambled up, trying to run up the stairs, maybe to lock himself in the bedroom, maybe to find a weapon. But the security guards were faster. Two of them moved in a blur of black suits. They grabbed him by the arms before he could take 3 steps. No, you can't do this. This is my house. I'm the CEO. I'm important. You are nothing, I shouted, my voice thundering over his screams. You are a fraud, and you are done. They dragged him down the stairs. He kicked and screamed like a toddler. His tuxedo jacket ripped, his shoes scuffed on the marble he had claimed to own. Vanessa ran to me. She grabbed my arm. Dad! Dad, stop them! He's my husband. You can't let them throw him out. Where will we go? I looked at her hands on my tuxedo sleeve. I gently but firmly removed them. You can go wherever you want, Vanessa, I said. But you cannot stay here. Dad, please, I didn't do anything. It was all him you watched, I said. You watched him wipe his shoes on her. You watched him drug her. You watched him starve her. And you did nothing because you wanted the car. You wanted the lifestyle. I pointed to the door. You made your choice. You chose the money. Well, the money is gone, and so is your father. She recoiled as if I had slapped her. She looked at Beatrice. Mom, she whispered. Mom, please, help me. Beatrice looked at her daughter. Her eyes were sad but dry. I helped you for 30 years, Vanessa, she said softly. I gave you everything, and you gave me a doormat. Goodbye. The guards dragged Bradley toward the door. He was sobbing now, begging Marcus for a second chance, begging me for mercy. I watched him go. I watched the man who had terrorized my wife being hauled out like the garbage he was. And then just as they reached the threshold, the blue and red lights of police cruisers flashed through the open door, illuminating the rain-slicked driveway. I smiled. Leonard had timed it perfectly. The police aren't here for the eviction, I said to the silent room. They're here for the felonies. 2 uniformed officers stepped out of the patrol cars. They met the security guards on the porch. I saw them exchange words. I saw the handcuffs come out. Bradley screamed as the cold metal clicked around his wrists. It was a sound I would remember fondly for the rest of my life. I turned back to the guests. They were staring at me with a mixture of fear and awe. Please, I said, adjusting my cuffs. Do not let this spoil your evening. The bar is still open. And unlike my son-in-law, I can actually afford the champagne. I signaled the band. Play something cheerful, I said. We have a lot to celebrate. As the music started up again, hesitant at first, and then stronger, I walked over to Beatrice. I took her hand. We did it, she whispered. We did it, I said. And for the first time in a long time, the house felt clean. The room was already spinning with the revelation of my identity, but I knew the human capacity for denial. Even with the eviction notice on the floor and his boss firing him, there were still people in that room, investors, friends, sycophants, who were wondering if maybe Bradley was just a victim of a cruel billionaire father-in-law. They needed to see the monster. They needed to see what happened when the doors were closed and the cocktail parties were over. I signaled to Leonard. He didn't say a word. He simply plugged a small silver flash drive into the laptop, connected to the massive projection screen behind the stage, the same screen Bradley had intended to use for his victory speech. The logo of Global Tech vanished. The room went dark for a split second, and then a grainy black and white image flickered to life. It was footage from the security cameras installed at the front door. The timestamp read Tuesday, 11:42 p.m. A collective hush fell over the room as the image sharpened. On the screen, a frail woman in a torn gray uniform was curled up on the welcome mat, shivering in the rain. It was Beatrice. The video was silent, but the image screamed. Then the front door opened. Bradley stepped out in his tuxedo. The guests watched horrified as the man on the screen laughed, said something to his friends, and then deliberately, casually lifted his muddy dress shoe and wiped it on my wife's shoulder. A woman in the crowd screamed. It was a short, sharp sound of pure disgust. The video cut to the next clip. The kitchen. Beatrice was sitting at the small table in the corner, eating something out of a plastic container. Bradley walked in. He slapped the container out of her hand. Food splattered across the floor. He pointed to the mess and then pointed to the floor, his face twisted in a snarl of rage. On the screen, my wife, the woman who had just walked in wearing diamonds, got down on her hands and knees, and began to eat the scraps off the linoleum. "Turn it off!" Bradley shrieked from the bottom of the stairs, struggling against the grip of the security guards. "That's fake, that's AI." He doctored it. But no one was looking at him anymore. They were looking at the screen with a mixture of nausea and fury. The final clip played. It was the living room. Vanessa was sitting on the sofa, scrolling through her phone, a glass of wine in her hand. In the background, Bradley was shoving Beatrice toward the basement door. Beatrice was crying, reaching out a hand toward her daughter. Vanessa didn't even look up. She just took a sip of wine and swiped on her screen. The screen went black. The lights came back up. The atmosphere in the room had shifted from shock to a palpable, dangerous anger. These were wealthy people, powerful people, but they were humans. They had mothers. They had grandmothers. And they had just watched a man they treated as an equal torture an elderly woman for sport. Leonard stepped forward again. He didn't look at the crowd. He looked directly at Bradley. He opened a red legal folder. "Bradley Thompson," he announced, his voice slicing through the murmurs. "In addition to the immediate eviction from these premises, I am serving you with a writ of attachment." He held up a sheaf of papers. "My client Clifford Dalton, through his holding company Obsidian, has purchased all outstanding debts registered in your name. This includes the $180,000 loan for the Porsche you purchased with stolen funds. It includes the $400,000 in credit card debt you have accrued across 6 different banks. And it includes the personal loans you took out against your future bonuses." Leonard paused, letting the weight of the financial noose tighten. "You are currently in default on all accounts. As the sole creditor, Mr. Dalton is exercising his right to seize all collateral immediately. The car is gone. Your personal accounts are frozen. The watch on your wrist. That belongs to us. The suit on your back, that belongs to us. You are leaving this house with nothing but your skin, and frankly, if we could repossess that, we would." Bradley slumped in the grip of the guards. He was hyperventilating. His eyes darted around the room looking for an exit, looking for a savior. But there were no saviors here. Only witnesses. "But we are not done," I said, stepping up to the microphone one last time. "I told you, Bradley. You forgot the first rule. Never sign what you don't own." Through the open front door, the night exploded with red and blue light. The wail of sirens, which had been a distant hum, suddenly became a deafening roar right in the driveway. The guests flinched. "This isn't local security," I said. "This is the consequences of your ambition." 6 agents in windbreakers emblazoned with FBI stormed through the entrance. They didn't stop to ask questions. They knew exactly who they were looking for. They moved through the crowd with efficient, terrifying speed. Bradley Thompson, the lead agent, shouted. Bradley tried to run. He actually tried to shake off the private security guards and bolt for the kitchen door. It was a pathetic, desperate scramble. The FBI agents tackled him before he made it 3 feet. They slammed him onto the marble floor face first. "You are under arrest for wire fraud, bank fraud, and conspiracy to commit elder abuse," the agent recited, pulling Bradley's arms behind his back. "We have a sworn affidavit signed by you pledging assets you do not own to a federal informant. You have the right to remain silent." I watched as they hauled him up. His nose was bleeding. His tuxedo was ripped. He looked at me, his eyes wild with terror. "Clifford, please, I'm family. Tell them it was a misunderstanding." I looked at him. I looked at the man who had starved my wife. "I have no family in this room," I said. They dragged him out the door, his screams fading into the night as they shoved him into the back of a federal vehicle. The room was silent again. The only sound was the soft sobbing coming from the bottom of the stairs. Vanessa. She was kneeling on the floor. She had collapsed when the video showed her ignoring her mother's pleas. Now she was alone. Her husband was gone. Her house was gone. Her reputation was incinerated. She looked up at me. Her mascara was running down her face in black streaks. She looked like a broken doll. She crawled toward me on her hands and knees, reaching out for the hem of my trousers. "Dad," she choked out. "Daddy, please. I didn't know he signed those papers. I didn't know about the fraud. I am innocent. Please don't let them take me. I have nowhere to go." I looked down at her. I saw the little girl I had taught to ride a bike. I saw the teenager I had sent to college. But then I looked at the screen behind me, which was now dark, and I remembered the image of her sipping wine while her mother was dragged to the basement. "You are not innocent, Vanessa," I said softly. "You are the worst kind of guilty. You are the bystander who profited from the pain." "But I'm your daughter," she wailed, grabbing my leg. "You can't leave me on the street. I'm destitute." They froze the accounts. I stepped back, pulling my leg from her grasp. "You liked the maid uniform so much," I said, my voice hard as diamond. "You liked treating your mother like a servant. You thought it was funny. You thought it was structure." I reached into my pocket and pulled out a card. It wasn't a credit card. It was a business card for a cleaning service in the city. "If you need money, Vanessa, I suggest you learn how to scrub a floor. I hear they are hiring. And don't worry about references. I will tell them exactly how good you are at watching other people work." She stared at the card. She stared at me. "Dad," she whispered. "The trust is dissolved, Vanessa. The inheritance is gone. You are on your own." I turned my back on her. I walked over to Beatrice, who was watching her daughter with eyes that were sad but dry. She didn't reach out. She didn't offer comfort. She knew just as I did that comfort now would only enable the poison to return. "Come on, Bea," I said, offering her my arm. "Let's go home." "Not this house, our home." We walked out the front door, past the sobbing woman on the floor, past the stunned guests, past the police lights. We got into the Rolls-Royce. The door closed, shutting out the noise, the crying, and the ruin. As the car pulled away, I took my wife's hand. It was warm. It was safe. And for the first time in months, I knew we were finally free. 6 months ago, I was a man standing in the rain watching my world crumble while jazz music played behind a closed door. Today, I am sitting on a porch that smells of salt spray and cedar wood, watching the Atlantic Ocean roll in against the rocks of the Maine coast. The only sound is the rhythm of the tide and the humming of a woman who has found her song again. Beatrice is down in the garden. She is wearing a sun hat and gardening gloves, kneeling in the dirt, planting hydrangeas. She isn't wearing diamonds today. She isn't wearing a couture gown. She is wearing jeans and a linen shirt, and to me she has never looked more beautiful. The bruises that mapped her arms like constellations of pain are gone, faded into bad memories. The hollows in her cheeks have filled out. Her skin, once gray and paper-thin from malnutrition and stress, is now bronzed by the sun and glowing with health. But the most important change isn't physical. It is in her eyes. The fog is gone. The chemical twilight they forced her into has lifted completely. She doesn't flinch when a door slams. She doesn't apologize for existing. She doesn't ask for permission to eat. She is Beatrice again. She is the woman who can debate me on politics over breakfast and beat me at gin rummy after dinner. She is sharp, she is funny, and she is mine. We sold the Greenwich estate 3 days after the party. I didn't even want to walk through it again. It was a beautiful structure, but the foundation was rotten. It was poisoned by greed and cruelty. I had Leonard liquidate it, furniture and all. I didn't want a single spoon or cushion that Bradley had touched. We took the money and we bought this place. It is not a mansion. It doesn't have a grand staircase or a ballroom. It is a 4-bedroom shingle-style house on a cliff overlooking the water. It has creaky floorboards and a fireplace that smokes a little if the wind is wrong, but it has something the other house never had. It has a soul. We wake up when we want. We eat what we want. We don't have to hide our money, but we don't flash it either. We just live. It sounds so simple, but after 40 years of building an empire and 3 years of living in a war zone disguised as a family home, simplicity feels like the ultimate luxury. I watched Beatrice stand up and wipe her forehead with the back of her hand. She saw me watching her and waved. "Clifford," she called out, her voice strong and clear against the wind. "The soil here is perfect. We are going to have blooms by July." I waved back. I remembered the night she whispered to me that she had been locked in the basement for breaking a vase. I remembered the terror in her voice. Now she was commanding the earth to grow confident that she would be here to see it happen. That is what money is really for. It isn't for Porsches or status. It is for buying the space to heal. It is for building a fortress where the monsters can't get in. We don't talk about them often. We don't talk about the trial that is coming up, or the letters from prison that Leonard intercepts and burns before they reach us. We don't talk about Vanessa. That wound has scarred over. It doesn't bleed anymore, but it is there, a thick, numb line in our history. I know she thinks about her daughter. I see it sometimes in the evening when the house gets quiet. She will look at a photo of Vanessa from 20 years ago before the greed set in, and she will sigh. But she doesn't reach for the phone. She knows just as I do that the girl in the photo doesn't exist anymore. She was replaced by a stranger who watched her mother suffer and did nothing. And we have learned through the hardest lesson imaginable that you cannot save people who are willing to drown you to stay afloat. I walked down the steps to the garden. I took the trowel from Beatrice's hand and pulled her into a hug. She smelled of lavender soap and earth. She felt solid. She felt safe. "You have been out here for 3 hours," I said. "Come inside. I made lunch." She looked up at me and smiled. A real smile, not the frightened grimace she used to give Bradley. "I am starving," she said. Those 3 words used to break my heart because they were a plea. Now they are just a statement of fact. We walked back up to the house hand in hand. The wind chimes sang on the porch. The ocean crashed below. We were 2 old people in a quiet house at the edge of the world. To anyone driving by, we looked ordinary, but we knew the truth. We were survivors. We had walked through the fire and come out the other side holding the only things that mattered: our dignity, our sanity, and each other. This is what winning looks like. It isn't a victory speech in front of a cheering crowd. It isn't a boardroom takeover. It is sitting at a kitchen table eating a sandwich with your wife, knowing that no one is ever going to hurt her again. Justice moves slower than revenge, but it hits harder because it is final. Revenge is a flash of anger. Justice is a cage. For Bradley, that cage is made of concrete and steel, located in a federal penitentiary in upstate New York. The trial was a spectacle, though I did not attend every day. I did not need to. Leonard Katz had assembled a case so airtight it would have suffocated Houdini. The affidavit Bradley signed pledging a house he didn't own was the centerpiece. It was a textbook definition of bank fraud and wire fraud. Combined with the evidence of elder abuse, the toxicology reports, the photos of Beatrice's malnutrition, the testimony of the security guards who watched him drag her out of the party. There was no defense attorney on earth who could save him. He tried to plead insanity. He tried to claim he was under duress. He even tried to blame Vanessa, claiming she was the mastermind, and he was just a loving husband trying to keep the family afloat. It was pathetic. It was the thrashing of a rat caught in a trap. The judge, a woman with eyes like flint, who had clearly seen enough men like Bradley to last a lifetime, was not impressed. She sentenced him to 10 years in federal prison for the fraud charges, to be served consecutively with another 5 years for the elder abuse and endangerment charges. 15 years. He will be 55 years old when he gets out. He will have no money, no career, and a felony record that will ensure he never steps foot in a boardroom again unless he is mopping the floor. But the prison sentence wasn't the only punishment. The financial ruin was absolute. Leonard made sure of that. Because I owned all his debt, I exercised my right to liquidate his assets to the penny. The Porsche was repossessed and sold at auction. The designer suits, the watches, the expensive electronics all gone. He went into prison with $0 in his commissary account. He went in as a pauper. I heard from Leonard that Bradley spends his days in the prison library trying to write appeals that no court will read. He tells the other inmates he was a CIHO, that he was framed by a billionaire conspiracy. They laugh at him. In there, he isn't a shark. He is just fresh meat. He wanted to be a big man. Now he is just a number. Vanessa's sentence was different. She avoided prison. The prosecutors decided that her role, while morally repugnant, was largely passive. She was an accomplice to the neglect, but they couldn't prove she signed the fraudulent loan documents. So she remained free. But freedom, I learned, can be its own kind of prison. I went to see her once about 3 months after the trial. I didn't speak to her. I just needed to see for myself that the cycle had been broken. Leonard told me she was working at a discount grocery store in Queens, living in a basement studio apartment that she shared with 2 other roommates because her credit score was destroyed and she had no references. I parked my car across the street and watched through the window. It was a Tuesday afternoon, gray and drizzling. Vanessa stood behind the register. She wasn't wearing designer silk anymore. She was wearing a polyester smock that was too big for her, a name tag pinned crookedly to her chest. Her hair, once highlighted and blown out weakly, was pulled back in a messy bun, showing dark roots. She looked 10 years older. She looked tired. I watched as a customer, a large man with a loud voice, started yelling at her. He was angry about a coupon that had expired. He pointed a finger in her face. He called her stupid. He called her slow. I watched my daughter flinch. I watched her hunch her shoulders, making herself smaller, trying to disappear. It was the exact same posture Beatrice had adopted when Bradley yelled at her. "I am sorry, sir," I saw Vanessa mouth the words. "I will fix it. I am sorry." She was scanning items, bagging groceries, wiping down the conveyor belt. She was doing the work she had always looked down on. She was serving people she used to ignore. Then the man did something that made my breath catch. He spilled a carton of milk on the counter. White liquid pooled around the register. "Look what you made me do," the man shouted. "Clean it up." Vanessa didn't argue. She didn't call for a manager. She grabbed a roll of paper towels and bent down. She started scrubbing the counter, her hands moving frantically. Some of the milk dripped onto her shoes, cheap canvas sneakers that were already gray with grime. She wiped her shoe with a rag, her head bowed in submission. The irony was so sharp it felt like a physical cut. She had allowed her husband to treat her mother like a maid, to wipe his shoes on her, to treat her like garbage. And now the universe had put her in the exact same uniform. She was the maid. She was the one cleaning up the mess. She was the one being humiliated for a minimum wage paycheck that barely covered her rent. She looked up then through the glass of the storefront. For a second our eyes met across the street. I saw the recognition hit her. I saw the shame flood her face, turning it crimson. She took a step toward the window, her hand raising slightly, a reflex, a plea. "Dad." I could almost hear her whisper it. She wanted me to come in. She wanted me to save her. She wanted me to buy the store, fire the rude customer, and take her back to the world of comfort she had betrayed us for. I didn't move. I didn't smile. I didn't wave. I simply looked at her, acknowledging her reality, and then I rolled up the window of my car. I told the driver to drive. I didn't hate her anymore. Hate requires energy. Hate requires a connection. I felt nothing but a distant, cold pity. She was living the life she had earned. She was learning hour by hour, dollar by dollar, what it felt like to be powerless. She was learning the value of the dignity she had sold so cheaply. She sends letters to the beach house sometimes. Leonard forwards them, but I don't open them. I know what they say. They are requests for money. They are apologies wrapped in needs. But I am done being a resource. I am done being a bank. Vanessa is not my daughter anymore. She's a stranger who looks like someone I used to know. And as I watched the grocery store disappear in the rearview mirror, I knew that leaving her there scrubbing milk off a counter was the most honest thing I had ever done for her. She was finally building a life with her own hands. It was a hard life, a small life, but it was hers. And that was justice. The sun is setting over the Atlantic, painting the water in shades of gold and violet that no money could ever buy. Beatrice is sitting in the rocking chair next to me, knitting a scarf. She is humming a song I haven't heard in years. She looks up and smiles at me, and in that smile I see the only empire that ever really mattered. I think about Bradley and Vanessa, often not with anger anymore, but with a kind of detached anthropological curiosity. They were the architects of their own destruction, but they blamed the ground for shaking when the building fell. They made the fatal mistake that so many arrogant people make. They confused kindness with weakness. They confused silence with stupidity. They looked at a man in a flannel shirt and saw a victim, never realizing that the man in the flannel shirt owned the very ground they stood on. They forgot that the person who drives the truck is the one who controls the momentum. I spent 40 years on the road. I learned that you respect the heavy machinery. You respect the weather. You respect the distance. Bradley and Vanessa respected nothing. They thought they could speed through life, cutting corners, running red lights, and crashing into people without ever paying a toll. But the toll always comes due. There is a lesson here, one that cost my family everything to learn. It is a lesson about the dangerous illusion of appearances. A suit does not make a man honest. A title does not make a man a leader. And a bank account does not make a man worthy of respect. True power isn't about shouting at waiters or wiping your shoes on people you think are beneath you. True power is the ability to protect the people you love. It is the ability to stand in the rain, humiliated and dismissed, and know that you have the strength to bring the whole house down whenever you choose. I chose to bring it down because they hurt Beatrice. That was their sin. If they had just stolen the money, I might have let them go. I might have just cut them off and walked away. But they tried to break her spirit. They tried to erase her dignity. And for that, there is no forgiveness. There is only the cold, hard correction of reality. I reach out and take Beatrice's hand. Her skin is warm. Her pulse is steady. We are survivors of a war we didn't start, but we are the ones who finished it. Do not ever let anyone tell you that you are less than them because of what you wear or what you drive. Do not let anyone treat you like a doormat. And if they try, remember that you do not have to scream. You do not have to fight. Sometimes you just have to wait for the right moment to turn on the lights and show them exactly who is in charge. My name is Clifford Dalton. I am a truck driver. I am a billionaire. And I am the man who taught his family the true cost of greed. Thank you for listening to my story. If you enjoyed this, please like the video and subscribe to the channel for more stories about justice served cold. And tell me in the comments, would you have forgiven Vanessa, or did she get exactly what she deserved? I will see you in the next story. There is a profound lesson in our journey, one that cost my family everything to learn. Never confuse silence with submission or kindness with weakness. Bradley looked at a flannel shirt and saw a victim. He didn't realize he was standing on land owned by the man he despised. True power isn't about shouting orders or flashing wealth. It is about the quiet strength to protect those you love and the courage to walk away from those who hurt you. Money can buy houses and cars, but it cannot buy character. In the end, dignity is the only currency that truly matters. If you believe justice was finally served, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of truth and redemption. And tell me in the comments, would you have given Vanessa a second chance, or did she get exactly what she deserved? I'll see you in the next story.